Hello, I'm Alexandra Sleator, Career Accelerator. And what this means is that working together, you will get to achieve your career aspirations faster than you would on your own. Indeed, together we can tackle a range of professional issues. Of course, we can support you in progressing your career, which is to say we can, for example, work on articulating a strategy so that you win a promotion you so richly deserve. But we can also help you repackage your skills so that you can make a bid for a new role. We can, of course, support you in your career right here, right now, in particular by helping you refine, polish such core skills as communication, for example, dealing with conflict or raising your influence, having more of an impact, but also around themes like team management, leadership, change management, all crucial skills in today's ever-changing world. And last, but by no means least, we can help you around a career transition. For instance, if you had a career break and seek to come back into the workforce, or if you want to redefine success and identify and embark on a new career in a different industry or something very different in any event. The point is that working together will make sure that you achieve your career objectives in a time and cost efficient way. Now welcome to the second offering on LinkedIn. Last time we talked about how to build your profile on LinkedIn so that it's complete as per the LinkedIn requirements, so that it's memorable, that it stands out, so that it doesn't have any risk of being confused with those ghost profiles. If you're interested in this offering and you missed it, the URL for it is appearing on your screen right now. Today, we assume that your profile is well advanced, and so now it's time to think about how to optimize your presence on LinkedIn. And so in the next few minutes, I'm going to chat to you about how to invite people to connect, how to yourself respond to invitations, how to calibrate your time involvement so you spend the right amount of time on LinkedIn, how to join groups, and finally how to look back. So let's get started. And in particular, the first point is, how do you connect with people? So here you are, your profile, as I said, is well on its way to being complete, so it's time to start building your network. Well, there are 3 I's to appropriately connecting on LinkedIn. And the 3 I's are import, invite, and introduce. And maybe probably a 4th I with in-mail. So, the first one is import. And import has to do with the functionality that LinkedIn has to have access, if you of course let it, to your address book. And it can be on Outlook, on Gmail, on a number of support. And in that sense, LinkedIn will tell you right away who among your address book contacts are already on the site. And that's a very easy way to start building your network. The second one is to invite people. That's the second I. And you will see when you look at somebody's profile that there's a big button called Connect on it. Now let me be very clear with you. Do not invite people to connect unless you know them. If you don't know them, there's other ways to approach them. And you see, the risk is that if you invite people that you don't know, they could reply with "I don't know." And the system logs that as an IDK, an I don't know. And in that sense, if you have 5 IDKs, your profile will be restricted. You will be assumed to be somebody who's not behaving appropriately and you're not adhering to the protocol. So be mindful of inviting to connect people that you indeed know. And in that sense, what you see is when you press the button connect, LinkedIn proposes to you a prefabricated message that says, "Hi, I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn." Now let me suggest very, very strongly that you delete this message and that you write a much more personal message to the person, that you remind them of how the two of you know each other, when is it that you met, maybe at a recent networking event the two of you were at, and that you make clear as well why you're interested in connecting. You don't need to make it long, 2 sentences will do it, But that way you will optimize your chances of the person say, oh yes, I remember meeting David, you know, last week at that conference, and yes, sure, I'm happy to connect. Whereas if you don't jog their memory, he might just press, I don't know, and that's a black mark against your name. So that's the logic of sending invitations that optimize your chance of a positive outcome. Be mindful that you have a set of 3,000 invitations that you can send out. It may look like a lot, but you know, be sure that you don't waste them. So that's the invite aspect of connections. The third one is introduce, and this one is of course very relevant when you don't know the person. And in that case, what could be very useful is to ask one of your existing connections to facilitate an introduction to that person. And that's the introduce functionality. And that avoids you being rejected, because the chances are that if you're introduced to someone, they will agree to connect with you. But you only press the connect button at a later stage once the connection has been introduced successfully. Now, if all comes to fair and you can't import and you can't invite and you can't be introduced, then indeed there is the in-mail functionality that I spoke to you about in the last tutorial, which is LinkedIn's own internal messaging system. And so you can email someone and say, hello, this is who I am, this is why I'm interested in your profile and in connecting. So that's, in a way, I guess, the fourth I of connecting with people. So I hope this is helpful to you in organizing and prioritizing how you're going to use the various optionalities available to you in LinkedIn to appropriately connect with people and build your network. So then the reverse occurs, which is you receiving invitations. And in fact, I often get the question, you know, I don't know this person, should I accept their invitation? And indeed, if the person has not bothered to personalize their message, if they are just contacting you with this prefabricated message that I'm so, you know, against, then you may be completely in the dark as to who this person is. You know, they have not made clear why they are contacting you. You know, what's the connection there anyway, and that is something to pause and consider. But I think, in addition to, you know, thinking, do I know this person in the first instance, look at their profile and ask yourself, is this person a real person? Do they have a photo? Or is their profile, you know, comprehensively populated? Is it helpful? Do I get to know this person? Because you really do want to avoid these spammers. And ask yourself, as you read this profile, what kind of affinities do we have? You know, if that person has not told me why we should connect, can I see it from reading their profile? Can I see that we share groups, interests, that we were at the same employer, or they're employed at the place that I've left, but they're still there, you know, whatever. Find the common points. And lastly, look at their connections. Do they have already a broad network, or are they themselves, you know, just starting out on LinkedIn and they're just using you to a little bit fictitiously build up their network? And look at the kind of connections that they have. Because remember, when you make a connection to someone, you don't just connect to them, you connect potentially to all of their connections. Because after all, through the introduce functionality that I just mentioned, you could have access to all of these people, and so on and so forth, right? So your network is much bigger than just your first degree connections. It's also about the connections of your connections. So think about the usefulness of those connections. It could be that this individual who's invited you to connect may not be very useful, but maybe their connections are. So these are the kind of questions that I hope will be useful to you around, you know, do we know each other? Does this person look real? You know, what do we have in common? And what kind of connections do they have that could make sense for me to eventually leverage in helping you decide, when you don't readily know the person, whether to accept their invitation. So this is the invitation, the toing and froing of invitations. So let's think about the time that you're going to spend on LinkedIn. And let me say right off that LinkedIn is the most static of the top 3 social media sites. And so in contrast to Facebook and Twitter, you do not need to go daily on LinkedIn. This is not what's expected. This is not, you know, what's done on LinkedIn. However, what's very important, and again referencing back to what I shared with you in the first tutorial, people who go on LinkedIn, employers, recruiters, headhunters, do value that profiles are kept up to date. So in that sense, your activity around LinkedIn must at least be to have an up-to-date profile. Now here are my 3 recommendations for how to calibrate your time involvement around LinkedIn. In the first step, as you're making this effort of building your profile, then start in parallel to create your network using the 3 or 4 I's that I shared with you a little bit earlier. And what is happening in that first stage is that you'll make a lot of new connections very fast, and you're in fact mirroring on LinkedIn the set of contacts that you have, you know, offline in the world. And so think not just about the people in your address book, which is the import functionality, but think more broadly about pretty much everyone you know. In a work context, of course, it's colleagues, it could be suppliers, customers, of course, but also friends and families. And again, the connection may not be in and of itself readily somebody you know, that you can think might be useful, although it's always nice to keep in touch. But think about the connections that these people in turn have. So that's the first sort of, you know, big effort around building your presence on LinkedIn, which has to do with both the effort to build your profile, but that first, you know, big investment in time around also your network. And once you've reached a phase where, you know, your profile is finished and your contacts are all in there, all the people you know are present on LinkedIn, at least as connections, if themselves they have a LinkedIn account, then you switch to a second phase, which is after the build-up, the maintenance phase. And there's 2 things around maintenance. The first thing is around when you meet someone new. You go to a conference, you go to a party, you go to a dinner, and you meet someone new. Ask yourself all the time, make it a habit. You know, might I want to connect with this person on LinkedIn? You go to get some training and you meet some new folks. And so do it in flow, so that you don't end up, you know, after 3 months with 50 business cards that you have to go through and type all the names in LinkedIn, because that's really painful. So do it in flow and say, oh, we just met 2 days ago, we met last week, how about we keep in touch via LinkedIn? So that's the people stuff. Now there's also indeed around maintaining your profile. So every time that something happens that has to do with a professional element of your life, something around your job, but of course also something around qualifications. You just got a new qualification, then update your profile. And when you touch any element of your profile, for example, you finished a class in Spanish, so you want to let people know that you have some capability in Spanish now, you add that. And the system, when it sees that you updated, added to, revised your profile, LinkedIn will automatically let all your connections know about it. Another way to let people know about new developments in your life, which don't involve you actually modifying any of your sections in your profile, is the share and update functionality. And that's particularly good when you come across an article or even a video, something that is of interest, something that doesn't, you know, require you to update your profile, and so you use that share and update functionality to let your connections know about something, and you can paste a URL link in that if you want to share again an article or a video. So that's what I call the maintenance phase, where it's, you know, regular but small chunks of time that you need to invest here and there, so that it doesn't feel heavy to maintain your profile on LinkedIn, because you do it in flow. And then thirdly, around your involvement on LinkedIn is cranking it up when it makes sense. Now, oftentimes it will make sense when you're in the market, when you're thinking of switching jobs. And there you may turn to your groups, you may turn to your connections, and ask people for tips, ask people for names of recruiters that they know, So that's when you will be more proactive on LinkedIn, because that's when LinkedIn really comes into its own as a place that brings people together in terms of, furthering people's professional activities. So that's the third part, but it will be, as you can see, very ad hoc, because it will depend on when you feel like changing jobs. But at least if your profile has been maintained, you won't have to suddenly make a big hoopla out of your presence on LinkedIn. It will be seamless that you can increase your presence and contact people around that job search. And of course, there's tons of ways of searching for jobs on LinkedIn. It's even more practical, I would say, than Google, for example. You enter keywords and lots of things, job adverts will come up. So that's, it's also a great database in that sense. So that's the third tip around calibrating your time on LinkedIn. My fourth tip is about wisely choosing groups to join. I've mentioned groups indirectly in the last few minutes. And for me, joining groups is about really two things. It's either about keeping in touch with people, or it's about keeping abreast of issues that are of relevance. So when I think of people, one of the keywords that I entered in LinkedIn when I was looking for groups was French expatriates in London, because that's, after all, what I am. And I wanted to see if there was other people on LinkedIn that were like me, a French expatriate in London, and lo and behold, there was a group. In fact, there was more than one. So here it's around thinking about the kind of population segments that you belong to. And you belong to, the groups of people that you went to school with, that you went to university, college with. You belong to the groups of people who have been at the same place of work that you. And you will see that a lot of companies have, employee networks on LinkedIn. And for some of the large companies, not only do they have a live employee LinkedIn group, but they even have an alumni. And then there's all these associations that people can belong to, like, chartered accountants, and all of these associations have a LinkedIn group. So if you're part of an association, make sure that you also join its LinkedIn group. So these are all about thinking about, again, the population segments that are relevant to you, that you are naturally part of, and to find them on LinkedIn. The other element, as I said, is around keeping abreast of issues that interest you. So again, as an example, one of the words I put in looking for groups was credit, because I've done a lot of credit risk in my life, and indeed that threw up a lot of groups, so I had to refine my search. But you see, I'm interested in credit, I'm interested in Basel II, I'm interested in lots of things, and so I put all these keywords, one after the other, in LinkedIn search engine, and saw what kind of groups came up. And then I pick the kind of groups that make the most sense. And you will see that there are many groups. In fact, in LinkedIn, there's 1.7 million groups that we know of at this stage. Maybe it's even more by now. And so there's plenty to choose from. So make sure that you get a feel for the right kind of group for you. So click on the group's name and go and look at the group. Notably, you can see its demographics. Its demographics will show you how many group members there are. So you may want to join big groups and also where they're based. Because if you're based in Europe, joining a group that's mostly US-centric may make less sense. So some groups don't have a geographical footprint that is relevant, but some absolutely do. For example, if I join, French expatriates in New York, I'd have trouble to join their monthly drinks. So I didn't. So that's around, making sure that you do invest a bit of time in selecting the groups by looking at the demographics, which is typically on the left-hand side of the group's presentation page. And you can see, of course, a history of the discussions that the group has had, and you can see whether that's the sort of thing that's interesting to you, that you would want to keep in touch with. When you select a group, make sure that you adjust your settings in the group. The settings is around who can see you, can they contact you with an email, and also about receiving a digest for the group's activity. And there the option is around either a daily or a weekly option. I recommend you pick weekly, otherwise your inbox will overflow very quickly, especially if you join several groups. A last word about groups is that you will notice that some groups are open while others are closed. You can see that the group is closed because there is a little lock next to the name of the group. And so in that sense, when you press join for a closed group, you're effectively sending out an application. And the manager of the group will look at your profile to ascertain that it makes sense for you to be part of that closed group. So be sure to have in your profile highly visible the fact that this group is indeed relevant to you. So when I joined French Expatriates in London, which is a closed group, it was pretty obvious that I was a French national who had immigrated to London. People could see that in my profile, so the group leader didn't have to interrogate me, and I was a natural show-in. So that's the one point I wanted to mention on groups, the closed versus the open one. A last word is, of course, once you're part of a group, what do you do there? Many people don't do anything. Many people just check the digests, and again, I recommend you make it weekly, so that they can see what's going on, what people are talking about, what people are sharing, and you can click on some articles that other people are sharing and read them if that's interesting for you. So you can be fairly passive. But groups are also useful when you want to ask for help. Remember that you may want to increase at times your activity, your presence on LinkedIn if you need something, and your groups are an ideal place to turn to in addition to your direct network of connections. And so we see people asking each other for advice, for tips, for information, and that's one of the nice things about LinkedIn and using groups. You can start a discussion about something if you want to tap people and gain their insights. You can have a poll as well, so there's many things that you can do with groups if you feel like being more active. And of course you can yourself just, again, more passively react. You can indicate, for example, if you like somebody's discussion without necessarily participating to it if you don't want to comment. But you can comment if you want to. So that's the fourth tip, around joining groups. And so here is my last tip, and that's around making sure that you know who is looking at your profile. Indeed, when you go on your LinkedIn homepage, you can see again, if you scroll a little bit, it's going to be again on the left-hand side, a link that says who's viewed your profile. And when you click on it, you will see who's looked at your profile in the last few days. Losing my voice. And so if you look at that, you will get a sense of who's interested in your competencies, in your background, in your capabilities. And while this information may not be relevant exactly to you right here, right now, it's a wealth of data that I really encourage you not to let go of, because we never know what the future could hold. And in turn, once you see the names of these folks who've looked at you, go on their profile and look at them. This whole process of knowing who's looked at you is called looking back. And when you look back, not only do you learn about people who are interested in your profile, and you may be surprised by what you see, and so you may want to consider what that means, but also it's a source of new connections, because that way you may find that somebody who's looked at you is very interesting to you, and then you can send them an invitation to connect, because in that personalized message you'll say, "Hello Paul, I saw that you looked at my profile the other day, and I went back and looked at yours, and I saw that we have together a shared interest of this, or we're part of the same group of that." You see, you already have that foundation. That means this person cannot just say, "I don't know." And you don't need an introduction anymore, because after all, they introduced themselves to you by looking at you in the first place. So looking back is a great source of expanding your network. And again, remember, it's not just about the person, it's about their connections as well. And of course, looking back works two ways. It's not just you looking back, but when you check somebody out, they might look back at you and check you out and invite you to connect. So it works both ways. So be mindful of this looking back, because it's really an interesting functionality, both for building your network and for knowing who's interested in you. If you notice a lot of headhunters looking at you, that's an interesting piece of information, isn't it? So there you have it, 5 tips to make the most of your presence on LinkedIn, how to appropriately invite people, how to know how to deal with invitations from people you don't know, how to spend the right amount of time on LinkedIn so that it's not a chore, and yet you have an updated profile that people will value, which groups to join and what to do when you're part of a group, and finally how to make sure that you look back and tap into that great wealth of information. I hope this was useful. As always, I would love to have your comments, hear your thoughts about those tips. Is that also what you do for those of you who are on LinkedIn? For those of you who are just building up their presence, was that helpful? Does that seem like a good idea? I would really invite everybody to share their tips so we can all optimize our presence on LinkedIn. There is a comment box below this video, but of course you can always contact me directly. My email address is appearing right now at the bottom of the screen, and I'm always delighted to get emails about people's thoughts and views. I did this tutorial on LinkedIn, the two-parter that concludes today, in response to a query, so I hope that, that for those of you who were interested, this has been indeed helpful. I will leave you now. Best of luck with building both your profile and your network on LinkedIn, and to your professional success. I will see you very shortly again. Take good care. Bye-bye.